Evan was just saying that in Nehemiah's story, he really knows like where he's going, what he wants to do, and he also knows the price that he has to pay, the price that he has to pay in order to get it done. And I have to say that when I went to Bible college, we had 3 years of Bible college, and then we went to the mission field. And I just needed to use all that I learned in Bible college without really knowing that was what I was doing. Like I had a pile of notebooks that I brought with me, but I hardly ever looked at them because I didn't know where to turn in there to find the answer to my problems or questions. But in my heart, I just basically trusted in Pastor Stevens. I trusted in God. You know, I hope that could be misunderstood. I wasn't trusting in him in that way. I was trusting in God. He taught me to. But I had to believe that what I had learned was important. And I had to believe that to teach the Finnish people these things was also a work of God. And for the Finns to say, this is also really a lot of fun, and it happens to people on the mission field when somebody in Africa looks at you and they say, can you teach me something more? You know, when somebody in China says, you know, could you tell me something more about the Bible? And you kind of like look at them like, you know, are you talking to me? Like, I don't think I'm qualified. But there's nobody behind you or beside you. They are talking to you. And so I'm going to sneeze in a minute. And when I do, I blow the microphone to pieces. Oh, it's terrible. So can I tell you a funny story that happened to me on the plane? True story. I was flying from India back here to the States. And there were two flights. First flight, I was flying in business class. And they had some kind of a French toast for breakfast. So I ate that, but it didn't taste right. So I got off the plane in Frankfurt. My son was with me, Kyle. And so when we're boarding the next flight, I told him, I said, I don't feel good. I don't feel good. I'm getting on the plane. Have you ever flown on a plane before? You got the aisles? Okay. And there's like people putting their luggage in the bins overhead, and you're just waiting, and it's going. Well, I'm starting to feel I'm going to vomit. Okay, I'm standing in the aisle, and it's coming. And you know that feeling just before it comes? You know, you just turn, you know, colors and perspiration, and it's just, there's no, you know. So I lunge past somebody in the aisle, and I fling open the bathroom door, which is in the middle of the plane. And I just fling it open, I go, you know, just as loud as you can imagine. You know, reverberating through the whole airplane. It sounded like I wrestled a bear. And then again, you know, just, and then I'm done. You know, the door is wide open and the people are like horrified. There's a couple hundred people, right? A big jumbo airplane. And I'm there like, oh. And so I walk out of the bathroom, and everybody's like looking at me. So guess what happens? The stewardess comes to me, actually calls me to the back of the plane, and then the pilot comes back to the plane, and the pilot explains to me, this crew doesn't want you on the plane. And I go, why? They said, they think you might have the swine flu. And I said, I'm like, I don't really care about everybody on the plane, whether they like me or not, right? Because I'm a leader. There's something bigger going on. What is it? I'm getting home. I'm going home. Okay, so I don't know what to do about it because I don't want to get off the plane. I go, I don't have the swine flu. I think it was from the French toast from your airline that I flew from India to here, And the pilot said, and the stewardesses and the steward, there's a guy there too, and they're looking at me like I've got horns growing out of my head, It's like don't touch him, The guy, we could die if this man is on our plane, right? Honestly, it was crazy. So this is what I just said. I said to the pilot, I go, I don't believe I have this one. I'm okay. I don't have any fever. That happened. I don't do it. It's documented by many witnesses. Okay, so I said, would you, because my son is on the plane, I'm on the plane, I'm going home. I want to go on this plane back to the States. So could you ask if there's a doctor on the plane? They can interview me, and then we can go by their advice. So he goes, yeah, that's fair. So they get on the PA, is there a doctor on the plane? So an Indian doctor came, and she came, interviewed me, asked me some questions, and she turned to the pilot and said, I don't think he has a swine flu, and I think he's okay. And so I was able to fly all through the flight. Nobody talked to me. Nobody. The steward would give me something just hand me, I go, hey, could I eat too? Could I have a drink? And it was here. Bad person. Bad person. That's crazy. Kyle had no idea what was going on. He was in the front of the plane, another compartment, and then he goes, why aren't we leaving? The stewardess said, they're having some problem with some guy in the back of the plane. And when we landed, I told him, that was me that they're dealing with. He's up there eating nuts and drinking, watching movies. I'm back there fighting for my life. That's funny. Okay, so we got to keep going here. Okay, we are going to read. Let's see. This is it. This is the. Let's just repeat this part and make sure. I know you understand it, and I know you got it. But in another way of drawing the picture about leadership, we have the first floor of the house, which we talk about a lot, and then we have the limitations of people, and this is where leadership is stifled in the kingdom. Because people are just looking for justice, retribution, fairness. But if you're only looking for a clean, neat world, you're not going to be a good leader. If you're only looking for fairness and justice, you're not going to be a good leader. You're going to be limited. It is very possible that people have their leadership nullified by the fact that they are easily offended and they're easily sidetracked and distracted by, secondary issues of importance. Like what people think about you is not as important as what God has called you to do. What Jesus did was more important than what people thought about him. I'm going to Jerusalem. And Peter said, no, you're not. You're not going to Jerusalem. Don't even think about it. And he said, get behind me. Yeah. He called him by an ugly word, and he was serious about it. You cannot derail me and distract me from what it is that I have to do, okay? All right, that's Christ. But what about us? Well, it must be similar, because I have the Spirit of Christ in me. We have the mind of Christ, and we must have something that we are doing that is bigger than ourselves. And this in our illustration is, living in the whole house. This means the spiritual life of the believer is critically important. The prayer life, the meditation life. That's why I read about people that have done extraordinary things, but they're ordinary people. Ordinary people that do extraordinary things because of God. Do not settle just for a normal life, like the good life, Like I think that people could look at some of our lives, the leadership of the church here, Pastor Lange, Pastor Colban, Pastor Cannon, and so on, and say, that is what I would like. Let's say you don't know what it really is to be Pastor Colban, first of all. You don't know what his challenges are. And in his marriage, great marriage and a great family. But I'm trying to say something. If you go only for the good life in the first floor of the house, you'll be disappointed. And that's not your calling. Your calling is bigger. And I want to put in here a word, I don't know, just to make the point, garbage. Okay, a lot of stuff happens. Proverbs 14:4. Do you know this verse, anybody? Proverbs 14:4. Who knows that verse? Let's raise your hand. Okay. Let's go there. I think it's a worthwhile study. Where no oxen are the crib. What's the word crib mean? Where the oxen eats from. The bin where the hay is, the trough, feeding trough of the oxen. It's clean when there's no oxen, right? And the other end of the oxen too, where the food is coming out, okay? There's none of that either. And we're not going to use that word, the S word. David Hadley, do you know that joke? I don't know if you know this. Your sister, Christina, once came to your dad and said, Dad, David used the S word. Have you heard that? How do you tell it to us correctly, because I'm going to get it wrong.
Shut up.
Oh, it was?
I think so.
Okay. That's the part I don't have it. He told me something else, so anyway.
What did he tell you?
That's what. No, the same idea. Like, David used the S word, and Pastor Hadley said, come here, Christina. What did he say? He said, shut up. Okay, so to her that was like terrible, right? All right, let's go back to the verse. Where no oxen are, the crib is clean, but much strength is by the strength of the ox. It means, have you ever seen in the magazines, Better Home and Gardens, the perfect house, perfect garden, perfect barn, perfect garage? Have you ever seen those pictures, right? Have you ever seen a barn without any animals in it? In any of those magazines? I have. Renovated, carriage houses, barns, garages, everything. And it's clean, neat, beautiful, right? Well, that's fine for Better Homes and Gardens, but what if you're going to have a farm, it's going to get dirty, and there's going to be a lot of work. And if you're going to get something done, it's going to cost you something. But if you want to live in a museum where everything is there perfect and clean and right, like, can you imagine? I did a message on this somewhere recently. It was so funny. We were in the museum, and there's Napoleon's coffee cup. And we're standing there with a piece of paper looking in the museum, Napoleon, item 402. Napoleon, look at the coffee cup. Napoleon drank from that cup. And we're going, really? Look at that cup. And then somebody in the crowd says, I want a cup of coffee. Shh, we're looking at the cup. We're looking at the glass case, everything. Okay, I think this class is deteriorating. Okay, yeah, all right. Let's finish this. Hey, life is not a Napoleon's coffee cup in a glass case, and it's not a Better Homes and Garden view of a barn. Life is a cow, hay, and it took work, and to clean the barn and keep the thing running and to get something done. It's a farm, and we have to feed people. And church life is like that. And by the way, family life is that way. And by the way, married life is that way. And by the way, life is simply that way. It can get very messy. And the purpose, the mission statement of the believer is not to have the perfect world. It is to live in a world where garbage happens, where it takes a lot of pain, there's a lot of sweat, there's forgiveness, there's investment, there's again forgiveness, there's investment, there's love, there's care, there's patience, there's God. And I think if God didn't want all the craziness that we have in this world, he could have easily said, I don't want a universe like that. I want a perfect universe. I don't want a universe with a lot of garbage slung around and a lot of pain and heartache and everything. I want to make a perfect universe. And he could have done it. But he would have never gotten what it is that we have now, which is a lot of garbage, a lot of pain, a lot of trouble, but also an understanding of God. And that's really the purpose of this life that you and I have. And if you ask Nehemiah, do you want to do something? It's going to be, from A to Z, click along like a machine. And you're going to be the hero at the end of it. And, you're going to hit all the things, and it's going to be amazing, and it's just going to clip along. And, you're right in charge. And he goes, you know what? That isn't how it's going to happen. I'm going to have a lot of craziness that's going to be going on, but I'm not going to stop because I know that God has called me. And when everything unravels, I will be there. And I remember that statement by Watchman Nee in China when the communists were taking over the Long March from 1922 on, and he was imprisoned. But they said, you can leave China now, like Witness Lee did, one of his colleagues. Witness Lee left China, and there was a time when Watchman Nee could escape China, no problem. And he said this, if the roof falls down on the church, somebody has to be there to hold it up with their head. And that was his philosophy about what God wanted him to do. I am staying in China. And when the attack comes against the church, I'm going to be there because this is my calling. I have to be here. I cannot run. I run, I'll save my life. But if I stay, I'll help the believers. And this is what God wants me to do. It's a book called Against the Tide. I recommend it. It's about Watchman Nee. If you're interested in reading more about that, Against the Tide, it's the communist takeover and the persecution against the believers in those years. Okay, a list, a short list here to go over more of the character elements of Nehemiah. He had clear decision making. Here's a good point. There are men that have a hard time making decisions. There are people that just say, I don't want to make a decision because I don't want to be wrong. I don't want to make a decision because somebody else could make it. I don't want to make a decision because it's safer that way. Then I won't be wrong, and it just maybe the decision doesn't need to be made right now. Maybe it could be made later. In many of those, but there's a threshold, a time when a decision has to be made. Threshold, and it's the time. And leadership has to sense what is going on and be there to make the decision. And you need to know what needs to be done, what decision needs to be done, and when does it have to happen. And I remember when we had our difficult times here, because this was an amazing period of the years 2003, 2002 was tough, but 2003, 4, and 5 in our church here in Baltimore. And I just knew that there were times when decisions had to be made. We're losing people because decisions were not being made. And then we would sometimes, as a board of elders, we would make, in my opinion, the wrong decision. We also had an agenda that was also driven by in my view, not wise decision making. So we would make decisions about things that were not important and overlook the important decision and the issues. And also another thing about Nehemiah was that he knew what was important, and he also knew, let's write that down, what was important, and also he was able to build confidence with people that believed he was addressing the issues, addressing the issues. If the house is on fire and you're talking about going on a picnic, you're out of touch with what's going on. When there's real problems and you're saying, there's no problems, everything is fine, then you're out of touch with what needs to be done. And maybe we don't want to face the fact that the house is on fire. And I know who wants to admit that, who wants to face it. But another thing about Nehemiah was that he was a realist. You say, it is so that they are fighting and they are resisting us as we build the wall. This was really what was happening in chapter 3. He assigned where they would build to use families, by the way. He had a good method. He used the families because families are naturally committed to each other and protecting each other and caring for each other. When the opposition intensified in chapter 4, he reinforced them, and he had them build with a weapon handy. They had a weapon, at the same time a trowel to build with, so they had both. And they were in small units, in families and clans, and they went at it working that way. You see, if his head was in the clouds or he wasn't a decision maker, then he would lose the confidence of the people. They'd say, you're saying everything is okay. It is not okay. Are you out of touch with what is going on? It is not okay. What are you going to do about our problems? And he could say, we don't have any problems. So then his leadership is nullified. Loses the confidence of the people, and they end up wandering around discouraged. And by the way, this was one of the problems that he had often, the discouragement. I mean, it's mentioned a few times. They were discouraged. But because he was a realist, and he was able to deal with things in a real way and address them personally, confidently, with a solution, then he gained confidence in his leadership. Here's a little example of something years ago. I drew this picture. A leader can be like a balloon. Okay, here's a balloon with a string on it, a helium balloon, and it floats. Okay, if you take the same balloon and you put a book on it like this, then it doesn't float. But you got two elements here that I think is healthy leadership or church life. You have the pressure of the church life, and then you have the church life, or we could say problems, gravitas, gravity, the weight of responsibility and vision. And then you have also the spiritual life of the church, spiritual life. And we could also say in the spiritual life, encouragement, strength, ability to carry the burden, ability to get it done, ability to address the issues. In some church life, it's this way. The balloon is floating like this, and there's nothing there for the church, no burden to bear. The other one is, it's this idea, it just buries the church. The church is just squashed. Help! It's problem-orientated church. This is problem-oriented, problem-oriented, and people are discouraged. There's no life in the church. There's no vision. There's no impartation. Christ imparted, and we're able to carry the burden. The other idea is that this is floating. And you might say to the church, what are you doing? And they're just saying, nothing. Nothing. We don't have any problems. We aren't doing anything. We just have a coffee time, and there's no real vision. There's no real mission. Both of those are wrong. If you have too much on the people, you can bury them. And if you have nothing at all, then you don't have God's vision and heart, because he cares. So the ideal thing is to have this Nehemiah's work is, we have something to do. God is with us. Let's get it done. Nehemiah, we got a problem. The rich Jews, they are taxing us. They've gotten our land, and now they want our children to be their slaves. And this is in Nehemiah chapter 5. And Nehemiah said, what? What? Yeah, the rich Jewish guys that are here, They've got our land, and now, because we can't pay anymore on our debts, they want to make our children slaves. And Nehemiah goes, can't happen. Cannot happen. Get all those guys here. I'm going to have a talk with them. And he got it straightened out. He was not afraid to be confrontational, and he wasn't afraid to make decisions, and he was willing to make decisions on the important issues. By this, he produced the confidence. Look at the problem kind of breathes life into the balloon. Like if I deal with the problem, it kind of brings us into that place of saying, God is with us. He is a fair God. He is a merciful God. God is with us and he's getting this done. Yes. You see how that happens? In other words, if you have a church with no problems, it might not be healthy. And it's like a balloon floating. They don't have anything really grounding them in the reality of God and his purpose. On the other hand, if they're buried with problems, it's overwhelming. And then in the right sense, as we live with God, we will face stuff. But the stuff is not greater than what we can handle. We can handle it. And our leader is going to help us handle it, through God. Okay? Your assignment is just to read the next 3 chapters up through 5, and you read the whole book as far as that goes, but I want you to just take some time and see how it unfolds up through chapter 5. And that's a light assignment because I'm kind of a light teacher, apparently. Not a heavyweight, but a joyful one. And I'm so happy to be with you. Praise the Lord. Yay!